Hello everybody, I am the Proactive Caregiver and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. Because if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved one. Today I want to talk to you about taking care of yourself through the means of your nervous system. I know this is probably not something you would have considered in your caregiving routine, but I want you to be able to at least start thinking about it a little bit more, because I've shared a little bit about how dementia has affected my mother, but it didn't just affect her. It affects a lot more than their lives. It wasn't until I became her caregiver that I started to finally realize and see specific lifestyle areas and how our life experiences affect us and in turn affect our nervous system. By seeing this, I could see a difference in how her quality of life could have been so different, and she could have prevented dementia and in the very least postponed it to way farther in her life. So today I asked Dr. Amy Baker to join me today to share parts of her story and pretty much shed light on how our life experiences affect our nervous system. Because once it's out of balance, well then that's what dictates how our lives are lived. As a pharmacist and healthcare administrator turned leadership and intimacy coach, Dr. Baker claims the prescription for health is not what we have been sold. She knew the healthcare system didn't foster health, but instead, Dr. Baker took and completed a functional medicine fellowship, and then a relational crisis led her to relationship coach training. This professional direction is where it became incredibly clear that humans need healthy, authentic relationships to self and to others to thrive. She loves helping high-performing professionals live and love on their terms with zero apologies. The interesting thing is her parents were caregivers to her grandmothers, one who lived with schizophrenia and another who lived with Alzheimer's. So she has witnessed the struggle that families and the medical system has faced up close. Thanks for coming on with me today, Dr. Baker.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, knowing that you began life and you already had caregivers as role models, what was it like? What were the challenges that you faced with experiencing those family struggles in the health industry?
As a child or witnessing my parents?
Well, as a child first, yes. And then
just confusion, I think, as a child, not understanding why my one grandmother with schizophrenia was shuffled from one house to another. Not understanding at a young age the struggle that my mom was having because they didn't talk about it.
Right.
Don't burden the children.
Exactly.
And so that was the main thing, just confusion and not understanding what was going on and how hard it was for my parents. I had no clue until I got older, probably in my late teens and early 20s when the light came on and they started to share the struggles.
What's been happening all your life?
Yeah. I mean, it went into late. I'm thinking my grandmother with Alzheimer's, I was actually in college at the time, and I remember my dad was struggling to find a home, just like my mom had struggled with her mom, who eventually moved in with them. But they couldn't find the balance between individualized care, like there was a home where there was a family taking care of her, highly individualized, but then family drama got in the way.
Of course.
And then they put her in a home where she was neglected. And I remember walking in one day, my dad went to Europe and he still regrets this. And I walked in and she was lying on the bed with her face in her plate of mashed potatoes. They had just put it in front of her even though she couldn't feed herself. And
horrible.
so just finding the balance with the constant turnover, making sure there's really good care, that, and then with my mom, the funding for my grandmother's care, because she made $25 or $50 too much a month from Social Security.
I hate the way the system is set up.
It was so close. And when she actually finally got good care for her after many, many years, I think over 20 years of taking care of her alone without her sister, it was hospice that was the fix.
Right.
Where my grandmother finally got the care she needed and it was paid for.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that definitely shows the brokenness and the backwardness of how our system is designed. It's not designed. It's ironic that it is called a healthcare industry, but it's really not designed for our health.
No.
It's works against us almost.
Well, and here's the thing. My mother is and was extremely resilient. I learned that from her. It's like, if I want something, I'm going to get it.
Right.
But not everyone's like that.
Yeah.
And she was willing to find ways to work the system as much as she could. But most people don't have that capacity, that resilience. They don't know that they can ask for things. And so that's what I found later on when I was in pharmacy school, was I became the advocate for my grandmother.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When you were going through becoming the advocate for your grandmother, were you trying to balance work, school, family? I mean, were you doing the dance, the caregiver advocacy dance?
Oh, totally. I was a single mom in professional school working. I think I wasn't working anymore at that time, actually, and trying to be there for them and be there for my grandmother and
try and fill in all the gaps.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to, filling in the gaps. So one of the areas that we had a previous conversation, and as we went through that, I thought, oh my gosh, this is definite caregiver knowledge that needs to be shared. And this is in relation to, I actually wrote a chapter in the book about how I bonded with my mother over once becoming a caregiver, but just before that, how I bonded with her, because we reached this level of understanding of how our life experiences, specifically related to sexual trauma.
Yeah.
We, of all the odd things that we could have discussed and bonded over, that was something that brought us together, not just as mother-daughter, but as women sharing an experience and our fears. But it's also something that she didn't talk about growing up. So I didn't understand a lot of her behaviors and her reasonings on how she was parenting me until I had my own life experiences.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit with the listeners about how sexual trauma can affect people and how then it eventually affects their nervous system as well?
Yeah. I'm pretty passionate about this. And so if it's okay with you, I'll share a personal experience.
Please do.
How it affects the nervous system in general.
Please do.
I had a beautiful storm in my life where everything converged. And at the same time that my sexual trauma, multiple sexual traumas over 27 years that I thought were just buried and, got like, that was,
it's
like
over.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
They surfaced. And some crazy, crazy behavior that really scared me. And thankfully I had someone that said, you need to see a trauma integration specialist. It seems like you're resourced. That's a good thing. If I had not had him, I would have been lost. So I mention that because my understanding now is that a lot of trauma can surface when people are acting out. Sometimes it's because they're actually resourced and the nervous system is ready to heal.
Interesting.
Not always, but sometimes that's the case. And that wasn't my case. So at the same time, my work, I'd been remote for 2 years, and they basically took away my freedom to be where I wanted to be and my autonomy. And so I felt powerless. And through my trauma therapy, I realized that every time I had felt powerless, like I did when I was raped, in the past, my nervous system didn't know the difference between that experience of sexual assault and just powerless in general. I mean, I'd be having a conversation with a guy who wouldn't let me talk, and I would get super activated, like really intense activation, or sometimes just completely shut down. So fight, flight, or freeze. Right. It depended on the situation. But I could look back and realize how many times in my life that I judged myself for being overly reactive, too much, crazy, any number of things, when actually I was just, my body was responding to something that was still in the body, and I didn't understand, and it hadn't been integrated. And so how that affects the body, one, we don't always know when we're being re-traumatized, right? It gets activated in these crazy ways. It could be a smell, it could be the sight of something, it could be something innocuous, honestly. But when that happens, we release stress chemicals, which cause inflammation over time. Over many, many years, it leads to chronic disease. Also, if we never feel safe in our body, meaning we don't have healthy relationships, or we don't know how to foster them, or we're in situations that are constantly bringing these things up, which is honestly very common with people with trauma. They find situations that kind of trigger that. It's
interesting, like a manifestation, like you pull it to you, or not a manifestation, an attraction.
Yeah. But so unresolved trauma leads to constant low-grade stress in the body, which over time, and inflammation leads to chronic disease. Dis-ease. We are not at ease in our bodies. We're not at ease in the world. And so it's like this slow thing that just builds.
So how did you begin to recognize, I mean, you had someone that helped point that out, but which I don't believe my mother had someone that pointed out the reactive state. So what were some of the reactions that you were experiencing? Because I know for me, I had a lot of anger and I didn't know where that was coming from. Why am I such an angry person?
Right. Well, and just right there, feeling anger, you said, I'm an angry person.
Right.
So we personalize and often it's like, if I feel angry, I'm an angry person. Well, no, you're angry and you're happy and you're sad and you're all the things. And it's easy to say, especially if we don't like that part, to take it on as all of it. When this was all happening and I was having these realizations, I was completely drained. I mean, at the end of the day, I couldn't think well. I had zero energy at the end of the day. And I was like, thankfully I had some understanding of why. But if I didn't, I would have thought my life was falling apart and I would have blamed it on my job.
Wow. Talk about having an epiphany. I think the first year or two that I stepped in as my mother's caregiver, I was exhausted most of the time. And I was shocked because I thought I had barely done anything. But caring for her was my trigger. Some of the ways, especially the shower days, those became my triggers. Comments she would make.
Right.
It always made me feel uncomfortable. And then by the end of the day, I couldn't wait to get her into bed and tucked in, it's over with, survived another day. And then I was just exhausted, just drained.
Yeah. And that's a sign that there's potentially that going on.
Right.
2, there's probably maybe not enough self-care.
Yes.
Which is very common because, I mean, they need so much.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right. Going in that responsive, like trying to give, but we don't give in to ourselves in return.
Totally. Or receive from everyone it's actually being offered so many places, and we just don't allow it to come to us sometimes.
No, I think at some point I stopped saying, I don't need that. My needs are taken care of because I want to reserve. I think I subconsciously was trying to reserve so I had for her. And after enough time went by, I was like, wait a minute. When is it my turn? And I didn't even think, well, I've been denying it all this time. I've been denying myself all this time. But that anger and that exhaustion, I was able to, once I finally was explained what this is, I was able to look back and see my mother and her emotional states. And so that's one of the areas that connecting that emotion, I connected it to her emotion with food and how she was using that as her pacifier, which didn't help.
Right.
Because the high level of sugar that she was going for just piled on.
Yeah. The coping mechanism.
Right.
Right. Most people are not taught coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
Healthy ones.
True.
I take that back. We are taught all kinds of coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
But we do what was modeled. So society models, have a glass of wine.
Right.
Wind down after work, right? Which there's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine, but...
A glass of wine.
Yeah, but when it's like, oh, I can't handle my life,
Here's a bottle.
Food, numbing out.
Yes.
Like, that's just so accepted because people don't really know how to connect healthily and reach out to someone who's actually going to listen, to be vulnerable, and to have that connection. Like, actually being vulnerable and being heard is one of the most regenerative things we can do for ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually nervous system co-regulation. Like me sitting here, looking in your eyes and having your attention is regulating my nervous system. But people don't do that.
That's so true because we avoid it because they don't understand. So I can throw this out as an example. I may come into contact, or what I did in the corporate world, and it was someone that just resembled someone from my past. And that resemblance triggers me. So instead of going forward and actually trying to have a conversation and resolve or just feel my way through it, I avoid that person.
Right.
And avoiding that person, taking that home at the end of the day, having that glass of wine, then 2 glasses of wine, then I want to numb out because I have other system issues going on. And then I go to bed feeling like I'm passing out at the end of the day because I'm exhausted, the wine boosted, painkillers boosted, all of that good stuff. Waking up in the next day and I needed coffee to keep going, to keep pushing through the day.
Yeah.
And it created this cycle.
And I love that you painted that whole cycle in that picture because I'm sure a lot of people were like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's me. That was totally me. Yeah. And if you could have paused in that moment and said, oh, they remind me of this person.
Right.
What happened with that person? And then either resolve like an outstanding resentment with that person or do some work around that. Or to just be like, okay, like that person's not in the room. But having that pause is what gets stolen so often when our lizard brain comes online, which is basically we have a stimulus and it's often very close to our emotions, is close to our what I call our lizard brain. It's our amygdala. And then it creates this survival response, which is get away.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so learning to slow down enough to have like that, I don't know how many millisecond pause to be like, oh wait, it's not the same person. What could have slowed or just stopped that whole cascade of events?
Yes. I wish, see, and this is why I wanted you to be able to explain that, because I wish I knew that so many years ago. I could have stopped a lot of the cycling that I was going through and not even understanding. And now I can actually, I still, not that the triggers ever stop.
Oh, no.
They just don't happen as often. And when they do happen, it's, in most cases now, I can take that pause and go, okay, what about this is freaking me out? What about this is making me, because I always called it my runaway. Mm-hmm. My runaway would get triggered and I gotta go. Conversation over. I can't talk. Take care. See you later. I gotta go. Because I had to get away, physically leave that place, the room, the person, the trigger, the scent,
Yeah. It's survival.
It is.
Our brain is amazing at keeping us safe. It just doesn't understand that the past is not actually here in the present.
No.
And that the future that we're imagining is not here in the present. But we have it. We're creating it in the present,
So for others that haven't experienced sexual trauma, and to the extent that we have gone through, they also have other areas in life. It doesn't have to be that kind of trauma that throws the nervous system out of balance.
I mean, it could be domestic violence. It could be feeling neglected as a child. It's any time where our system is overloaded and we are left alone to deal with it. That gets locked in the body. There's actually so many traumatic events that if a loving person is there and present and acknowledges and validates that person's experience, it doesn't get lodged as trauma in the body. So, it could be as simple as a child that's left to cry at night. And then they just feel, for some reason, that just gets lodged in the body because as a child, when we don't get the love and attention we need, it means death because we rely on that attachment to survive.
That's true.
So up to a certain age, it literally means death to the body and the nervous system. And that gets lodged in there.
That reminds me of the thought that how many times that even when I had both my children, the doctors or the pediatricians would eventually, you're supposed to let them cry it out and cry themselves to sleep.
I was told that too, yeah.
And I believed a lot of that eventually they'll get tired and exhausted and cry themselves to sleep. And I thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah. We were lied to. I mean,
there's so many things that I didn't realize how much is a lie or
not the full truth.
Not the full truth.
Yeah,
right.
Don't fall asleep. Here's the thing though, you and I both, I'm sure, have done our darndest to be good parents and good people, right? I truly believe we're doing the best we can at every moment with the tools and the resources we have in that moment. If a caregiver is under-resourced, they're tired, they haven't been taking care of themselves, they're hangry, they're going to have less access to what they need to take care of the other person.
Exactly.
Because they have less resource. If they don't have tools to navigate themselves and the others, they're not going to do as well. There's no fault, right? But once we realize that, and we have awareness, then we can gain tools. And right. The beautiful thing about awareness is that once the light bulb goes off, it may dim a little bit, but it never goes out.
Right.
Thank goodness.
At least you could say, well, I know I should be doing or making a better choice right now, but at this point in time, I really just want to have this small chocolate chip cookie. Or I know I should be drinking more water, but right now I need to have this other beverage just to change it up or something that the awareness is there.
Yeah.
But it has to be there first. That's the thing that I realized my mother has been teaching me every step of the way, that if she had different tools, then she would have had a different quality of life. Yeah. She would have passed down those kind of tools to me instead. And then I would have passed down those tools to my sons instead. And it's so on. But instead, we keep going through this survival mode, not really understanding how we work, but somehow we're in this autopilot mode.
Yeah.
And ironically, we know to turn certain things off, but we don't know how to turn other things on when it comes to habits and tendencies and even genes, like connecting, because that's another thing I didn't realize, the epigenetics that go into that.
Oh yeah, I mean we're talking about intergenerational trauma here.
Yes.
And there's actually, do you know about the study with the cherry blossoms, the mice and the cherry blossoms?
What is that one?
So just real quick, they did a study with mice and they exposed them to cherry blossoms, at the smell of cherry blossoms, at the same time I think they were pricking their paws or something painful. And so they created this response that every time they smelled cherry blossom, eventually they would just get like scared and skittish and whatnot. Their children who had never been exposed to cherry blossoms would get anxious when they smelled it.
Oh, wow. That is amazing.
And I can't remember how many, it passes for several generations. So there are things that are passed down in our genes that we may react to former trauma and not even know. And so just to partner with our nervous system, and I don't think you need to know what that is in the past. Just be aware of the nervous system being activated in a survival mode. And then say, what's going on here? Can I be present with it? And then we start to shift the pattern when we stop reacting and start responding. And then everything shifts from there.
It's incredible. It is absolutely understanding that now. I feel like I have another tool in my toolbox for caregiving. And then it makes me want all caregivers to understand this. Because I have to stop and think, if we don't treat the sexual trauma, or because we, like you said earlier, it's over with, it's done, it's gone. I can just move on and mull through life.
Yeah.
What is talking about going to change anything? We talk ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
And it's so, by not treating that or figuring out that awareness of the fight or flight mode, what does that do to our bodies gradually?
To not resolve it?
Right. To not resolve that trauma or reactions to the fight or flight mode.
I mean, short term, whenever our stress hormones go up, our immune system goes down. So in the short term, which probably happens with a lot of caregivers, they get sick.
Right.
Okay, that's a sign that their stress is too high. It's also, the universe is amazing. It gives us opportunities to rest.
Yeah.
You know, if we can look at life as working for us, not against us, you know, and be like, instead of saying, oh, I'm sick, it's like, oh, it's giving me a rest I wouldn't take for myself.
Yeah. It's forcing rest.
Yeah. But over time, when the immune system, or when the stress hormones stay high for chronic, like way too long, then what happens is they start to lessen. Like the body's like, I can't keep this up anymore.
Yeah.
The immune system goes up, and then you get autoimmune disease.
Oh, wow.
Autoimmune disease is almost always a result of chronic stress. It's not just unresolved trauma, it's also all the stress of a chaotic life, of not being able to receive and not asking for help. You know, financial issues, whatever the stress is, divorce, kid issues, like it just all
piles on.
And we have choice.
Right. We forget that we have choice.
We forget in every moment we have choice. But when we're in our lizard brain, it's really hard to do that. So the way to get out of that, one way to get out of that is to breathe and like feel our body. And getting, like, there's a lot of techniques to get present. You know, touching something, looking at like 5 different, you know, colors or textures or something in the room, and then like hearing the sounds, just tapping into our senses.
Right. See, and I think that's where caregivers, they mentally force their thought process into, I don't have a choice. I have to. And that's the cycle, instead of doing the wine and numbing and coffee, it's a different kind of cycle. I have to, I don't have a choice. And I think this is where a lot of caregivers finally give in when it comes time to transitioning their loved ones to that assisted living, because they're sick all the time, or they just can't keep up.
Yeah. I mean, life has helped them in an uncomfortable way.
Right.
To push them towards what they really needed in the first place, maybe, or to get the help, whatever that looks like.
Right.
But what you're saying, that there's only one choice, that I don't have a choice,
mm-hmm.
that's actually a powerless position.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if someone feels powerless, I highly recommend looking at that if they have any trauma in their past. Because to feel powerless feels like they don't have a choice.
Right.
And I'm not saying that is what's happening, but I would be
most likely.
Where have you felt powerless in your life before? It may not be trauma. It may just be like, my parents never listened to me. They never gave me a choice, whatever. Okay, well, you have a choice now. But that's also a sign, and I don't know if you want to go into this now, but the polarized brain.
Yes. Perfect segue.
So what happens, so any circumstance in our life is completely neutral. And then we put a judgment on it, good or bad.
Right.
Right? Like, I could have all kinds of thoughts and nervousness about here, and I could put you on a pedestal and judge you as amazing, what this or that, or I could look down on you. Mm-hmm. But you're a human being, a wonderful human being sitting here,
Right.
And when we judge something as positive or negative, and I'll use the caregiving, like, do you have an example of what something you've judged? Like the shower.
The shower.
This is horrible.
Yes.
Right?
I hated it.
Yeah. So there's something in the brain at some point that judged it negative.
Yes.
And it always makes sense. There's nothing wrong with that. But then the amygdala actually assigns a valence, a charge, literally in a chemical sense, assigns a charge to that specific instance.
Wow.
And the more judgment we have, positive or negative, on something, the more charge we have, and the more out of whack our system is. And the more we're living from the hindbrain. In the hindbrain, there's our perception goes like this, because we're in survival mode.
Right.
So there's one option, there's black and white thinking, there's all or nothing words, and there's the imperatives. Should, have to, need to, not like I want to.
Right.
I choose to. It's like, I have to do this, I need to do this, I should do this, I ought to do this. There's only one option.
Right.
No, there's usually like multiple options. But when we're in that phase, we can't see the forest for the trees. We can't see all the options. So I think I'm saying that because I feel it's a really good way for people to go, okay, wait a second. Am I in black and white thinking?
Yeah. This or that, all or none.
This is all bad or all good. No, not really. It's all bad and all good. like every situation has both.
Right.
And every person has all the traits. So we may judge something in someone, but that's really because we don't accept it in ourselves. We have every trait. If you look, like, we are all angry people. We are all mean sometimes. We're all judgmental. Like, we
all get hangry at one point or another.
We don't get to escape being human.
No.
But we want to. So, real quick, I'll just finish up on that part, is when we are living an inspired life, when we are true to ourselves, when we're able to voice the truth of what's happening for us, which could include vulnerability, right? In a safe space, all right? You want to be received in that. And when we're doing what we love, which is part of self-care, we are able to be in the executive center, which is the forefront, which is the place of reasoning, of intuition, of wisdom, where like possibilities open up and we can actually be resourced and resourceful in how we make decisions. And we can hear the people in front of us instead of being like, oh, fuck, I don't want to do this.
Right.
I can't hear you right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good sign. I think those are good signs to know, like, where is my brain and my the brain is the seat of the nervous system, but where is that right now?
It's so incredibly important to even be aware of that and get out of that autopilot mode that I'm just reacting to a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one last thing, actually, that helps the executive center, it's curiosity. Well, actually, two things. What's happening here? What's happening here? Or to get really curious about the other person. Instead of judging, be like, why are they doing that? Not to me, that's a victim mode. If there's to me at the end of the question, it's like, that's a victim. But like, I wonder why I'm acting this way. I wonder why they're acting this way. I'm really curious. And the last is gratitude.
Yes.
There's always something good happening for everything bad.
Right.
And when we can find the gratitude, we can start to soften this response and see the bigger picture of what's happening right now, right in front of us.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you put it that way, because when I think about the bigger picture, I didn't begin to be more curious until I started to become more aware. Why did I react that way? Why does this person affect me this way?
Right.
And the curiosity just grew. Well, now it's not this person, but it's that person. What is it about this situation that always gets me going? You know, the curiosity just kept growing and growing. And the more I followed that little rabbit down the hole of curiosity to figure out who is this inside of me that's feeling all these different things, or why am I feeling different things at different moments, different situations, or the same thing with different people. When I looked into that a little bit more, I started to see the positives. I started to find things that I could be grateful for. And then it turned into, well, I'm glad it's this because it could be that instead.
Right.
Or I'm glad my life is this because it could go that direction and that would be way worse. And
nice.
It made a difference.
Yeah, curiosity opened up. You started to see patterns.
And that's what's led me on this this mission of slowing this dementia epidemic.
Yeah.
Because applying that to my mom and saying, okay, this is what she did, this is what she didn't do, this is what she wasn't aware of, this is how she going and seeing all the patterns to that, it was like, oh my gosh. Now I see it everywhere I go. Yeah. Conversations, I clue into what people are saying, the victim mentality, or the all or nothing, you know, I clue into those in others, and it's amazing.
Well, here's tying back to before. What's happening is it's polarized brain. Mm-hmm. It's causing the person to go into survival mode, which is releasing stress hormones, which is causing inflammation in the brain, not just the body.
Exactly.
It's the whole body, so it inflames the brain.
Right.
When our brain is inflamed through poor diet, poor mindset, unresolved trauma, we're not able to respond as well.
Right.
So it's not just trauma integration. It's not just changing our mindset. It's also our diet. But but it's you can't just do it like that. You have to look at, is the brain on fire from all this long-standing inflammation? Right. How do we bring that inflammation down so that we can respond better? Right? If we're not resourced, if we have like all this inflammation in the brain, we're not fully resourced, then it makes it harder to be curious, to not be reactive, and you know, and to advocate for our self-care. And
right, because at that point we're just existing and we're just trying to get by, and then we fall into this, I just want everything to be convenient and easy. Yeah. And then in that mindset, we're just feeding the inflammation, and it's so I've heard it saying that we've got two wolves inside of us, and which one do you decide to feed? And I thought, well, now knowing this and understanding this better, letting the curiosity grow, it's like, oh, I've been feeding the bad wolf all this time. And the good wolf is sitting there scrawny, just waiting for me to throw her some love.
Yeah.
Throw her some attention. And so this is something also, and a perfect other segue here, is that becoming curious, becoming grateful, finding purpose in life. That is something that in another conversation we talked about how your grandmother that experienced Alzheimer's was late onset, and the difference in purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about what was her life like before she was affected by Alzheimer's?
I mean, she was a secretary in a top secret with the Air Force. Wow.
Exciting.
Top secret stuff, yeah. And she was the fastest, most accurate typist they had on the base. Mm-hmm. And she took great pride in what she did and supporting I don't know what level. I'm horrible with military rank, but whatever he was. And then they wanted her to use electric typewriter, and she was like, this thing is too slow, but she kept with it. And then I think she was like, she might have been 80 years old, and they wanted her to use a computer.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I'm not doing it. From a woman who was born in 1911.
Right. Big difference.
Huge. And, she worked with it a lot, but she was like, no, I'm out. And she declined so rapidly because she had nothing else in her life. She had us as family. My dad would take her to breakfast every Sunday, and thankfully we were around. But she would drive and forget where she was. She didn't have friends to keep her mind active. She didn't have
social activities.
Yeah, and she didn't have activities in her life to keep her brain really going. And she was alone most of the time in the house that she raised her kids in. So, and then she broke her hip and just went downhill very quickly. So, but it was just a drastic decrease because she didn't have purpose. Right. She didn't, 80 years old and raised her kids, and now what, and, she'd already traveled the world. And so it's really important for us to have some purpose. And even if she was a secretary, it was great. Whatever it takes to be of service in a way that lights us up.
Yes.
And brings us energy and
exactly
fosters creativity and inspiration. Like, that's a sign that we're on the right track.
I love the way you said that. I love the way that brings us energy.
Yes. Because
right away, one of the things that came to mind is I can imagine caregivers out there saying, I do have purpose. I'm taking care of whoever, their spouse or their child or their loved ones. That, yes, is a purpose, but you also said what gives you energy. And a lot of times that it's what you're doing, but it may not necessarily be your purpose in life, or your purpose is to care for them, but you forget your purpose is also to care for you.
Totally. And if we have, if we felt forced into that position, children really don't have much of a choice.
Right.
They always have a choice, but it's kind of like, if there's resentment around that's something to be worked on. Like, there's ways to work with resentment and see the beauty of this showing up in your life and how it's working for you. But if there's resentment, it's not going to be your purpose.
Right.
Until that's resolved.
Oh, it was not my purpose when I started. Nope. I was full of anger and resentment, and through the process, through the years, it slowly dissipated, and I could finally start seeing my mother as a human being, just trying to get by with the limited resources and the limited tools in her toolbox that she had been all of her life been using.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, trying to get her to go to therapy was just, she was beyond set in her ways. It's not something that her generation did.
No, it's not in her value system.
But it's something that changed my life, being able to do therapy and be heard.
Right.
And talk about.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing is like wanting for others what we value.
Right.
When it's not in their value system. And how can we just love them as they are? I mean, I have the same struggle. My mom just refuses to go to therapy. You know,
Yes.
I get it. Like,
it's a challenge because I just know life would have been so much better. I remember when I had the one session, I had many years of therapy, but I remember the one particular session that it finally broke a pattern and I could actually step aside and see, oh, this is how I've been looking at it all my life. And this is how it really is.
Yeah.
And when I was able to make that switch, everywhere I drove outside of that session, colors were brighter. Like I didn't understand. I just noticed that feelings started to make a difference.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I had been in this autopilot mode and not feeling for so long that all of a sudden I'm feeling and feeling. These scents were beautiful. These colors were beautiful. The brightness of this or that. And it felt like it came out of nowhere, but it was a switch of...
Yeah. Sounds like your brain got balanced in that moment.
I guess now that I'm hearing this, I guess that's what was happening.
Yeah.
But helping other caregivers have that moment, they have to understand the way the body works. And asking them, are you tired all the time? Well, yes, I'm tired all the time. I'm doing this, I'm going there, I'm having balanced dinner and cleaning house, and we got to go to the doctor's appointment. They see their lives of how they're living, not, well, let's make a checklist of how do we help them?
Yeah. Well, and that's a life of doing and tasks that need to be done versus being. How can I be with this experience? How can I acknowledge how hard it is for me to watch my parent regress?
Yes.
How can I acknowledge how angry or sad or grieving I am that our dynamic has completely shifted and somehow I'm in the parent role and I didn't want to be here?
Right.
Like, can that be named to someone who's really compassionate versus stuffing it in and thinking you gotta suck it up?
Right. Suck it up, buttercup. That's another way of our society.
Yeah, but that stuff gets buried and then it comes out sideways in weird ways, you know?
Yeah.
But when we can have a place to voice those feelings and feel it and just, it passes. Like, it's amazing. Emotions come and then they go if we just let them. 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Yeah, and that's enough time to take a couple of deep cleansing breaths and let it come, acknowledge it, let it go.
Yeah, and notice it passes when we don't react to it and we don't reach for that cookie or that glass of wine if we can like be with it. And it takes work. I had a rough week last week. It still happens.
Oh yeah.
But the more awareness we have, the more we can slow down.
Yeah.
The better. And what you just said, I want to highlight because you said it was one session. Like you'll do many sessions.
Right.
But it just takes that one to like totally shift your perspective. Right. And my trauma integration, like I still see him. It's been 2 years. I still see him every couple of weeks, but we didn't have to go into the events a lot. Like as something came up, we would go into it, integrate it, and out of it. And then I just had to integrate in my life what was unraveling. Like we don't actually have to revisit that stuff over and over again.
That's interesting the way you say it that way. What I hear is I had to make space in my life for these feelings that have been boxed and shoved down for so long. Mm-hmm. And now they're trying to come up and out. And I was like, there's no space for this. Nope, put it back.
Yeah.
And they just kept coming up and nope, put it back. Until finally I was like, okay. Apparently it's time.
Yeah.
The universe is saying it's time.
Yeah, because the nervous system didn't get to fight, didn't get to say no, didn't get to run away. And so that gets lodged in the body. And so with trauma integration, often it's just allowing, it's like going enough into it, activating the nervous system, and then letting it finish in the way it didn't get to finish. Saying no, or pushing someone away, or letting, sometimes the legs will quiver. There's all kinds of ways that the nervous system releases. Just like dogs, they'll shake it off. Yeah. We don't do that.
Right.
We like stuff it in. If we could do that more, it'd be great. Like, after something stressful, just go,
shake it off.
That felt really good.
Right. Hey, I started doing that with my yoga. Just especially when my arms start feeling tense, and just shake it and wiggle it out, and it works.
Yeah.
I can do the next pose.
Totally.
And not feel like I'm going to collapse.
Yeah, we're designed to actually do that.
Yeah.
If we allow ourselves.
So I love the way you put this, and I really want to bring light to this because it's part of the awareness. A healthy and resilient nervous system is the core of health. Therefore, if we are not addressing our nervous system, we are not addressing health.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So as caregivers are going through their day, like you said, they're doing their tasks, their to-dos, their have-tos, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What kind of signs can caregivers look for to recognize when their nervous system is crying out and saying, I need attention, or I'm out of balance?
Yeah. Just tension in the body, is one. Bracing. That's the biggest one, because if we're relaxed, that's a good sign.
The neck and shoulder pain, where a lot of people hold their tension.
Yeah, and that's just a sign. Can we be with that pain? Often it's telling us something. It's bracing against something, which is usually a thought.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so can we just be with that and be like, feel it and be with the sensation of tension? The other is, like we've mentioned before, black and white thinking.
Oh, right.
There's only one solution here. Not really. But if you're in survival mode, you're going to think that. So all or nothing. So one solution, black and white thinking. It's all good or all bad. And then the shoulds, have to, ought to, need to, those imperatives.
Okay.
Those are values put upon us that they're not our values.
Wow. And if we saw our parents living with those values, then we adopt them and say, that's how I have to live.
Right. To be the good child, I have to do this.
Right.
No, you don't have to do all of it to be the good child. Right. It's like, but noticing, wait, that's someone else's values that I've taken on, which is super draining, because we're allowing ourselves to be taken out of choice. And can we, look at our own values and say, well, this is what I value. Can I challenge those shoulds, ought to, need to, have tos? According to who is the question?
Right.
Who says I have to do this? Is it me, or is it like society, or is it some...
Both?
Yeah. Is it something that I got from my childhood? Who, according to who?
Right.
Those are huge. And then, am I completely drained in this person's presence, in this room? Noticing the state of our energy. It's a little more advanced, but just noticing, wow, every time I leave that room, I feel super drained. Oh, maybe they're not hearing me. Maybe I need to set a boundary here.
Right.
Maybe I need to speak up for myself, or advocate for myself, or something.
See, and a lot of those feelings that I was experiencing, I didn't understand this as being the nervous system. What happens, what I still hear from a lot of caregivers is, oh, you're just getting older. You're just reaching that age. And now on the flip side of this, I'm going, age is just a number. if I understand what's happening, then to me, there's got to be a solution. There's got to be something and many things actually in this case, because like you said, I need to eat properly. I need to get good rest. I need to not wait till I'm sick to force myself to rest, or not wait until I have an injury to force myself to be still and rest.
Ideally.
Ideally, yes. But it took a couple of years of getting sick, of having tummy issues all the time. Not necessarily IBS, but the inflammation that I didn't understand that's what was causing so many of my issues. In fact, to the point of pushing my body into this perimenopausal state, that there's just so many things that were out of balance until life happened in such a way. It was like the surrender flag. Hey, listen.
Yeah, thank goodness, right?
Look at this. This needs attention. And if you don't take time to put some serious attention to this, then you are going to be on the path that your mother was on. You are going to start experiencing the slippage of time and all the other symptoms that led into the early onset.
Yeah. They call it inflammaging for a reason.
When you said that the first time, I thought I heard you wrong. I thought, wait, was that inflammation? Did she say it? And then I've heard it again since then. Mm-hmm. And it makes more sense.
Yeah, I didn't coin it. It's
inflammaging.
Inflammaging. It's all, I mean, we seem to think it's all external factors, but it's also what we're doing and saying to ourselves in here.
Right.
Right. Which also causes inflammation, which is why I say the nervous system is the root of it all.
Right.
It's the messenger. It's we have interoception and neuroception. It's the messenger in and out.
Right.
It's the seat of the soul is in the brain. Like, yeah, I don't want to. I could get.
We can go. Yeah, that's another podcast. Which automatically it was like, oh, that's fascinating. The curiosity, the curiosity is there. I was like, I want to keep going on that one. But at this point, I'm grateful that you were able to share this information and explain it in this way, because it's knowledge is power. I mean, the more we can learn now, the more we can break some of the programming that we have been given and start teaching our kids by our own examples, for one, but teaching our kids, okay, I know we used to go through the drive-thru for fast food, but we're not doing that anymore, and we're going to go get some fresh greens, and we're going to go, learn how to cook and have some family time together in the process of just making changes, just being able to understand that it's not the all or none. It's not the black and white. And when you feel these things, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. And also, don't feel like you need to change everything all at once.
Oh,
can I share one practice that I've been
absolutely
doing?
Please do.
Because I think for someone who's really in the thick of it, this might resonate. So with my last divorce, it was rough. And my intuition said I need to focus somehow on what's going well in my life, because I couldn't go to sleep at night, and just, the survival mode was on. And I found this 5-year journal where every page is a year. So it's 365 pages, or 6. And because of leap year. And then, and so you just write down, I would write down what I was grateful for that night, right before I went to bed. Because a lot of people say, do it in the morning.
Oh, right.
But at night is usually when all the crap comes up. And then it's like rumination starts, and we can't go to sleep. We think all the things we need to do tomorrow, we could have done today, and blah, blah, blah. And what I did wrong.
Yeah.
And the very last thing I did before I put my head on the pillow was write, what am I grateful for today? What went well today? I'm in my 9th year.
Oh, nice.
And I didn't mean for it to change my outlook. I just needed to get through another day.
Right. A nice download.
yeah, like I just gotta see what's positive today. But it literally changed how I view life. I'm more able to be grateful. I'm more able to see what's working for me.
Love it.
So if nothing else, I would highly recommend it for people who are just like, I just need to get through my day. Awesome. Right. Look at just write down what worked. And then when you get to go back and see the year before and see how far you've progressed, and it's super powerful.
Especially because you can see from the beginning of one year and through seasons, and as the life of especially your caregiving changes, you can look back and go, wow, this is how I used to think. This is what I used to focus on.
Yeah.
And how it evolves into something different.
Well, or see like that person was in my life and they're still showing up for me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank them for being a consistent, good person in my life, or whatever, like, or, oh my God, I started this practice of yoga. I'm doing it a year later, like high five, pat on the back, some of those things, they're really, really helpful. So,
well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that is difficult.
No.
And like you said, that's something that I need before bedtime, because otherwise my mind just rolls and rolls and rolls. If I'm not giving it something, of course, I write so much throughout the day, and then I get to the end of the day and I'm just spent. And so I put on my eye mask that has the little speakers, and I listen to binaural meditations. Nice. So it forces my brain to think of something else.
Totally.
Instead of going. But the writing, this book was the hardest thing for me to do, but it was also the best thing because I got it out.
Yeah.
And the curiosity helped me to see things and people in different ways. And I'm still learning. I still want to know more. It's awesome. It's just exciting and especially hopeful, knowing that we can make a difference. We can change our patterns.
Yeah.
We can help our nervous systems. It's not inflammaging.
Right. We don't have to.
Not entirely.
It's inflammaging. We have a choice over how much inflammation is in our body and in our mind.
Right.
And so we can start to slow or stop the progression of dis-ease. Let's find the ease in our life. Let's find the gratitude. Let's find our joy.
Right. Not to be confused with convenience and easy things, because finding this is not going to be easy in some cases, especially dealing with other traumatic areas, PTSD and other areas. It's not always easy, but you got to start somewhere.
But man, is it worth it? When I started,
yes,
every time I would set a boundary out of love for myself, my self-worth would go up.
Yes.
Right. And it was amazing. And then I would start to receive more from people, and it's just the little things add up.
Right.
And so taking the first small, consistent step will have huge benefits later. We don't need to I'm broken, I need to do all this stuff, right? It's like, no, just something small every day will compound and will grow.
Yes.
Start where you are with one thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So true. So for our listeners that are curious now, how do they find you if they want to ask or need more information?
Amy RX Baker on social. AMYRX BAKER.
Awesome.
Yeah, mostly Instagram, but I'm there everywhere. that's my tag everywhere.
Awesome. Well, it makes it simple.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing this information.
Yeah,
and I have a feeling we're going to have to go into some of those other areas that I'm very curious about, because my brain is already spinning on that.
Yay!
Well, thank you for joining today and listening. I hope this episode gave you some more food for thought for now. And if you want some more information, or you can read the partner blog that goes along with it, you can go to www.proactivecaregiver.com. Thanks again, and until next time, be proactive. Take care. Thank you for joining today. To find out more about becoming a proactive caregiver yourself, visit proactivecaregiver.com and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Music provided by www.joystock.org. The Proactive Caregiver is produced by Canon Light Media.